The signal the universe was vast and cold and mostly empty. And for 10,000 years, the conclave of aligned species had searched its depths for others like themselves. They had found bacteria on frozen moons and strange worms in the crushing depths of gas giants. But never once had they found another thinking species. Never once had they heard a voice calling back to them across the endless dark. The conclave was made of 7 species, who had found each other long ago and built an alliance that spanned 1,000 star systems. And they had grown comfortable in their belief that they were alone, that the galaxy belonged to them and them alone. High Arbiter, Yeltos of the Velkari race, had spent his entire life believing this truth. And on the morning that everything changed, he was sitting in his private chamber aboard Station Vareth 9, drinking warm nutrient broth and reviewing trade agreements that bored him to his very core. The alarm that shattered his peace was unlike anything he had heard before, was the deep-range detection alarm. A sound that had not been triggered in over 300 years. A sound that meant the listening arrays had found something unexpected in the star. Yeltos moved faster than his old bones should have allowed, his 4 legs carrying him down the curved corridors of the station, until he reached the central monitoring chamber where a dozen technicians were staring at their screens with expressions of pure shock. "Report," he commanded, his voice sharp despite the fear building in his chest. Senior Technician Veth turned to face him, and Yeltos had never seen one of his own species look so pale. "We have detected structured electromagnetic transmissions," Veth said, "coming from an uncharted yellow star in the Orion Spur, approximately 47 light-years from the nearest conclave outpost." Yeltos felt his twin hearts skip in their rhythm. "Structured transmissions," he repeated slowly. "You mean signals, artificial signals, signals made by thinking beings?" Veth nodded, and then added something that made Yeltos grip the railing for support. "Not just signals, High Arbiter, but thousands of them, overlapping and competing and broadcasting on every frequency we can detect, as if an entire world is screaming into the void all at once." The next several days were chaos wrapped in wonder, wrapped in terralinguists and mathematicians and experts from every conclave species gathered at Vareth 9 to study the transmissions, working in shifts that blurred into one endless effort to understand what they were hearing. The signals were dense with information, packed with images and sounds and what appeared to be entertainment broadcasts and news reports and personal communications, all tangled together in a storm of electromagnetic noise. When the translation matrices finally produced their first coherent analysis, the lead linguist Dr. Menthes gathered the senior staff in the main conference room and displayed the results on the wall screen. "We have confirmed that these signals originate from a single planet orbiting the yellow star," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "A planet the inhabitants call by many names in many languages, but most commonly referred to in their dominant trade language as Earth. One planet," Yeltos said slowly, "producing all of these signals, all of these different transmissions." Dr. Menthes nodded, and what she said next would echo through conclave history for centuries to come. "The planet does not host one civilization, High Arbiter. It hosts many, hundreds of distinct nations and cultures and languages, all existing simultaneously, all broadcasting independently, all competing for the same frequencies." The room fell silent in all of conclave history. No species had ever failed to unify before achieving space travel. No world had ever reached the stars while still divided against itself. The very concept was considered impossible by every sociological model they possessed. "How?" whispered Ambassador Lyris of the Ethon delegation. "How can they function? How can they advance technologically while still fighting among themselves?" Dr. Menthes brought up a new display, this one showing visual transmissions captured from Earth. and the assembled delegates watched in horrified fascination as images played across the screen wars, fought with weapons of terrible power. Explosions that bloomed like flowers of fire and death. Soldiers marching across ruined cities, leaders giving speeches to cheering crowds. Scientists working in gleaming laboratories. Artists creating works of strange and haunting beauty. Children playing in streets while overhead the contrails of military aircraft painted white lines across blue skies. They do not stop fighting to advance, Dr. Mentis said quietly. They advance because they fight. Their competition drives them forward. Their conflicts push them to create better tools, better weapons, better everything. They are not unified by peace, but by a shared love of struggle. High Arbiter Yeltos made his decision that night. He convened an emergency session of the full Conclave Council via quantum link, presenting the evidence to leaders across 1,000 worlds. And when the debates finally ended and the votes were cast, the decision was unanimous. They would send an envoy. The finest ship in the Conclave fleet was selected for this mission. A diplomatic vessel called the Harmonious Reaching, crewed by the best officers from all 7 species, and carrying ambassadors chosen for their wisdom and their courage. Commander Lyris was given command of the expedition. A choice that surprised her, but one she accepted with the grave understanding that she might be leading her crew into the unknown on the day of departure. High Arbiter Yeltos came aboard to address the crew personally. His ancient body frail, but his voice still carrying the weight of authority. You go now to meet a new species, he told them. A species unlike any we have ever encountered. A species that has achieved the impossible by refusing to admit that it was impossible. Be cautious, be respectful, and above all, be ready for anything. Because I do not think these Earthlings will be anything like what we expect. The Harmonious Reaching departed Vareth 9 at midday, its engines carrying it toward the distant yellow star and the strange blue world that orbited within its warmth as the station grew small behind them and the stars stretched into lines of light. Commander Lyris stood at the viewport and wondered what they would find. She wondered if these humans would be friendly or hostile, primitive or advanced, beautiful or terrifying. She would have her answers soon enough. What she did not know, what none of them could possibly know, was that Earth was classified in the ancient surveys as a Class 12 death world. A planet so hostile to life that the original Conclave explorers had marked it as permanently uninhabitable and moved on without a second glance. They had never imagined that anything could survive there, let alone thrive, let alone build civilizations and weapons and dreams that reached up toward the stars. They were about to learn how wrong they had been. The Harmonious Reaching sailed on through the dark between stars, carrying its crew toward a meeting that would change the galaxy forever. And in the depths of space, the electromagnetic whispers of Earth grew louder with every passing hour. A chorus of voices speaking in languages no Conclave citizen had ever heard, telling stories no Conclave mind had ever imagined. The humans were waiting. They had been waiting for a very long time. First contact, the journey took 47 days. And with each passing hour, the signals from Earth grew stronger and stranger and more overwhelming. Commander Lyris spent most of her time in the communication center, listening to the endless flood of transmissions and trying to make sense of a species that seemed to contain multitudes within itself. She heard music that ranged from soft and gentle to harsh and violent. She saw images of great beauty and terrible destruction, often within seconds of each other. She watched humans laugh and cry and fight and love with an intensity that made her own emotional responses feel pale by comparison. They feel everything so strongly, she said to Dr. Menthus one evening. Every emotion turned up to maximum. Every experience lived at full volume. How do they not burn out? How do they not simply collapse from the weight of all that feeling? Dr. Menthus had no answer for her. Only more questions that none of them could resolve when the Harmonious Reaching finally dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. The bridge crew gathered at the viewports to catch their first glimpse of humanity's home. What they saw made several of them step backward in alarm. The yellow star was angry and violent, spitting radiation and solar flares into the void with a fury that would have sterilized any world the Conclave considered habitable, and yet there was Earth, the third planet from that raging sun, hanging in space like a blue and white jewel wrapped in the thinnest layer of atmosphere. Gravity reading, Commander Lyris requested, her voice steady despite her growing unease. 1.4 times Conclave standard, the sensor officer reported, and then added with clear disbelief, and the atmosphere is 21% oxygen. A gasp ran through the bridge. Oxygen was a volatile gas, a chemical that could burn and explode, a substance that most Conclave species used only in carefully controlled industrial processes. The humans were breathing it every moment of their lives. The surface temperature ranges from -89 degrees to +57 degrees depending on location and season. The sensor officer continued, and approximately 71% of the surface is covered in liquid water, with significant tectonic activity across all continental masses. Commander Lyris felt something cold settle into her stomach. This was not a planet that should support life. This was a death trap, a world designed by some cruel cosmic joke to kill anything foolish enough to set foot upon it. And yet here were the humans, not merely surviving but thriving, building cities and launching satellites and filling the electromagnetic spectrum with their constant chatter. Open a communication channel, Lyris ordered. Broadcast the universal greeting sequence on all standard frequencies. The message went out. A mathematical sequence designed to demonstrate intelligence and peaceful intent. And then they waited for 3 days. Nothing happened. The harmonious reaching drifted in orbit around Earth's moon, its crew watching and listening and growing more nervous with every passing hour. Some of the delegates argued that they should leave, that the silence was a warning, that nothing good could come from a world this hostile. Others wanted to wait longer, to give the humans time to respond, to show patience with a species that had never encountered alien life before. On the 4th day, the argument became irrelevant. Sensor alarms screamed across the bridge as dozens of new signals appeared all at once. Powerful transmissions directed straight at the harmonious reaching from multiple points on Earth's surface. The humans had noticed them. Commander Lyris ordered the communications officer to translate the incoming signals. And what came through the speakers was a cacophony of voices speaking over each other in at least 12 different languages, all asking variations of the same questions. Who are you? Where do you come from? What do you want? Are you friendly? Are you hostile? Can you understand us? Please respond. Please respond. Please respond. They are all talking at once. Ambassador Kethval of the Morvani said with clear distaste. Can they not organize themselves? Can they not choose a single representative? I do not think they work that way, Dr. Mentis replied softly. Remember, there are many nations, many voices. They do not speak as one because they are not one. Before anyone could respond to this observation, the sensor officer called out another alert. Commander, a vessel is launching from the planetary surface. Trajectory indicates it is heading directly for us. On the main view screen, they watched as a craft rose from Earth on a pillar of fire. Not the clean energy fields that Conclave ships used, but actual chemical combustion. Controlled explosions that pushed the vessel upward. Through the crushing gravity and the thick atmosphere, it was brutal, and loud and shockingly effective. Within hours, the human vessel had matched orbit with the harmonious reaching, and Commander Lyris found herself staring at a ship unlike anything she had ever seen. It was made of metal and ceramic, angular and graceless. covered in what appeared to be heat-resistant tiles, scarred by the violence of atmospheric entry. There was nothing elegant about it, nothing refined. It was a machine designed to survive a hostile universe by being tougher and meaner than anything that the universe could throw at it. "They are requesting permission to dock," the communications officer reported. Voice trembling slightly, Commander Lyris took a deep breath and made a decision that she knew would change everything. Grant them permission. And assembled a full diplomatic delegation at Airlock 7. The wait for the airlock to cycle felt like the longest minutes of her life. Around her stood the ambassadors of the 7 conclave species, dressed in their finest ceremonial robes, practicing their greetings and adjusting their translation devices. Then the inner door opened, and the humans stepped through. There were 3 of them, wearing simple uniforms of dark blue fabric. And Lyris felt her legs go weak at the sight of them. They were huge and tall, not exactly, but dense, packed with muscle and bone in a way that spoke of evolutionary adaptation to crushing gravity. Their skin came in varying shades of brown and pink, stretched over frames that radiated heat like living furnaces. Their metabolisms clearly burning fuel at rates that would kill any conclave species in a matter of hours. But it was their faces that truly terrified her 2 eyes that tracked movement with predatory precision. A nose that seemed designed for hunting prey across vast distances. And mouths filled with teeth, actual teeth. Bone protrusions evolved for biting and tearing and chewing when the lead human smiled in what was clearly meant as a friendly gesture. Ambassador Cathval made a small sound of distress and stepped backward. "Greetings," said the human, her voice deeper and richer than any conclave species could produce. "My name is Shen Wei, and I represent the United Nations of Earth. We have been waiting a very long time for this moment, and we are so very happy to meet you." She extended her hand toward them. 5 fingers spread wide, and every instinct Lyris possessed screamed at her to run instead. She stepped forward on legs that felt like water and took the human's hand in her own. The grip was warm and strong, impossibly strong. And Chen Wei's smile grew even wider as she shook Lyris's hand with careful gentleness. "Welcome to our solar system," Chen Wei said. "We have so much to talk about," looking into those predator eyes. Commander Lyris could only nod. She had found the humans at last, and she was beginning to realize that the Conclave had no idea what they had just encountered. The revelation Ambassador Chen Wei was not what anyone had expected. She was small by human standards, barely reaching the shoulder of the male humans who had accompanied her. And she moved with a quiet grace that seemed almost gentle, but even she carried scars. Lyris noticed them during the first formal meeting. Pale lines running along Chen Wei's forearms, marks that looked like they had been left by something sharp and violent when asked about them. Chen Wei had simply shrugged and called them the result of a hiking accident, a casual dismissal that made the conclave delegates exchange nervous glances. What kind of species treated obvious wounds with such indifference? The meetings took place in the diplomatic chamber of the Harmonious Reaching, a circular room designed to make all parties feel equally comfortable. Though it quickly became clear that the humans were comfortable everywhere. They sat in chairs, not designed for their bodies, without complaint. They drank conclave water without testing it first. They breathed the ship's carefully filtered air as if it were perfectly natural. Nothing seemed to bother them. Nothing seemed to frighten them. And that calm confidence was perhaps the most unsettling thing of all on the 3rd day of negotiations. Chen Wei requested permission to share what she called a cultural briefing, a presentation about human history and society that she believed would help the US Conclave understand her people better. Commander Lyris agreed, thinking it would be useful intelligence. She had no idea what she was about to witness. The presentation began with evolution, with images of the primitive primates that had eventually become modern humans, tree-dwelling creatures that had descended to the ground and learned to walk upright. We evolved as pursuit predators, Chun Wei explained, her voice calm and matter-of-fact. Our ancestors would choose a prey animal and simply follow it, walking and jogging for hours or even days until the animal collapsed from exhaustion. We could not outrun our prey, but we could outlast it. Ambassador Kethval raised a trembling hand. You mean to say your species hunted by refusing to stop, by simply continuing until your prey could no longer flee? Chun Wei nodded as if this were the most natural thing in the universe. Our bodies are designed for endurance. We can regulate our temperature through sweating. We can carry water with us. We can eat almost anything, fat or protein or plant matter. Our ancestors would chase animals until those animals literally died from exhaustion and overheating. And then we would eat them. The chamber had gone very quiet. The presentation continued, moving from evolution to history. And with each passing minute, the conclave delegates looked more and more disturbed. They learned that humans had survived ice ages that covered half their world in frozen death. That they had watched supervolcanoes darken their skies and kill most of the life around them. They learned that humans had domesticated wolves, actual apex predators, by feeding them scraps and slowly turning natural enemies into loyal companions over thousands of generations. You befriended wolves, Dr. Mentis whispered. You took one of the most dangerous predators on your planet and made it your ally. Chen Wei smiled, and this time the expression seemed genuinely warm. Dogs are humanity's best friends. We have lived together for so long that we have shaped each other. They became loyal and loving, and we became capable of the kind of unconditional affection they taught us. But the warmth did not last. The presentation moved on to human warfare, and the chamber grew cold again. They watched images of ancient battles fought with swords and spears, of medieval sieges that lasted for years, of industrial wars that killed millions in trenches of mud and blood. They watched footage of mushroom clouds rising over cities, of nuclear weapons that humans had built to destroy each other and then chosen not to use, holding the power of annihilation in their hands for decades without pulling the trigger. You created weapons that could end your own species, Commander Lyra said, her voice barely a whisper. And you kept them. You still have them. We do, Chun Wei confirmed. They help keep the peace. Knowing that any war could be the last war makes us more careful about starting them. The logic was insane. The strategy was madness. And yet, somehow it had worked. The humans had not destroyed themselves, despite having every tool necessary to do so. When the presentation moved to biology, several delegates requested permission to leave, and Lyris granted it without question. Those who remained learned things that would haunt their dreams for years. Human bones could break and heal stronger than before, their bodies treating damage as an instruction to improve rather than a permanent loss. Human immune systems fought constant wars against billions of hostile organisms, bacteria and viruses and parasites that tried endlessly to destroy them from within. Humans could lose limbs and survive, could lose organs and survive, could lose massive amounts of blood and survive through sheer biological stubbornness. We have recorded cases of humans continuing to fight after receiving wounds that should have been instantly fatal, Chen Wei said, showing medical records that made Dr. Mentis turn a shade of gray. Adrenaline and determination can push our bodies beyond what should be physically possible. But the final revelation was perhaps the worst. What do humans do for recreation? Ambassador Lyris asked, hoping to find something, anything that would make this species seem less terrifying. Chen Wei thought for a moment. Many humans enjoy consuming ethanol, she said. It is a chemical that we produce by letting fruit or grain ferment, and in small doses, it creates a pleasant feeling of relaxation and reduced inhibition. Dr. Mentis checked her translation device, certain that something had gone wrong. Ethanol, she repeated slowly. You mean the industrial solvent, the disinfectant, the chemical that is toxic to virtually every known form of life. Chun Wei nodded again, seemingly unaware of how horrifying her words were. We also drink caffeine for energy, which is a natural insecticide, and many humans enjoy eating capsaicin, which is a chemical that plants evolved specifically to cause pain and discourage animals from eating them. The chamber was completely silent, Commander. Lyris looked at the small human woman standing before them. Really looked at her, and for the first time she understood what they had found. This was not just an alien species. This was a species forged in the fires of a death world, shaped by billions of years of constant struggle, designed by evolution to survive absolutely anything the universe could throw at them. You are not a species, Dr. Menthis said finally, her voice hollow with shock. You are a biological weapons platform. Chun Wei tilted her head slightly. Considering the statement, we prefer the term adaptable, she said. And somewhere in her predator eyes, there was a hint of amusement. We have learned to survive in every environment our planet offers. From frozen tundra to burning deserts to the depths of our oceans, we survive because giving up is simply not in our nature. She paused, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a weight that made every delegate lean backward in their seats. We have been alone for so long, fighting only each other, struggling only against our own world. But now we know there are others out there. Now we know the galaxy is full of life and wonder and possibility. Her smile returned, warm and genuine and absolutely terrifying. We cannot wait to see what we can survive together. Commander Lyris excused herself after the meeting ended and went directly to her quarters, where she composed a message to High Arbiter Yeltos that took her 3 hours to write. When it was finished, it contained only one recommendation: not make enemies of these humans. Whatever you do, whatever it costs, do not make enemies of them. They were not built to lose. The hegemony's shadow, the harmonious reaching, returned to Conclave space, carrying its crew and a report that would shake the foundations of galactic civilization. High Arbiter Yeltos read Commander Lyris's assessment 7 times, each reading leaving him more disturbed than the last. The humans were everything the Conclave was not. They were aggressive where the Conclave was careful, passionate where the Conclave was measured, divided where the Conclave was unified. And somehow these traits that should have been weaknesses had been forged into strengths that made them almost unstoppable within days of the report's release. The news had spread to every aligned world. Scientists demanded samples and research access. Military leaders wanted threat assessments and defense plans. Philosophers debated what it meant for their understanding of life and evolution. But the Conclave was not the only power that had noticed. Earth, far beyond the borders of aligned space, in the dark regions where the Conclave's light did not reach, another civilization had been listening. The Kethvoran hegemony had existed for longer than the Conclave itself. An empire built on conquest and subjugation, ruled by a warrior caste that viewed all other species as either threats to be eliminated or resources to be exploited. For centuries, the hegemony had circled Conclave borders like a predator waiting for the perfect moment to strike, held back only by the knowledge that a full invasion would cost them more than they could afford. Now, everything had changed. High Commander Vrethos stood in the war chamber of his flagship, surrounded by tactical displays and intelligence reports, and felt something he had not experienced in a very long time: excitement. The intercepted transmissions from the Conclave told him everything he needed to know about these humans. These impossible creatures from a world that should have killed them. They were strong. They were aggressive. They were built for war in ways that even hegemony soldiers could not match, and they were. David Vrethos saw opportunity where others might have seen threat. If the hegemony could reach Earth before the Conclave integrated these humans into their alliance, If they could subjugate the Deathworlders and bring them into the fold. If they could breed them and train them and turn them into the perfect soldiers, the Conclave would fall within a generation. He brought his proposal to the Supreme Council, arguing his case with a passion that surprised even himself. "These humans are exactly what we have always needed," he declared. "A species built for war, designed by their own world to be unstoppable. And right now they stand alone, unprotected." Unaware of the true nature of the galaxy, the Council debated for 3 days. Before reaching their decision, the hegemony would mobilize every available war fleet was called to service. Every reserve unit activated. Every shipyard pushed to maximum production. 60,000 vessels gathered at the staging point. The largest armada in hegemony history, crewed by millions of soldiers who had been told only that they were going to claim a great prize for their empire when the fleet departed for Sol System. The light of their engines lit up the void like a new constellation. News of the mobilization reached the Conclave within weeks. Carried by spies and scouts who had long watched the hegemony's borders, High Arbiter Yeltos felt his heart freeze when he read the reports. Knew what the hegemony intended. Knew they were going to try to enslave the humans before the Conclave could establish proper relations. Knew that if they succeeded, the balance of power would shift forever. He also knew that the Conclave could not stop them. Hegemony fleet was too large, too fast, too well armed for the Conclave's defensive forces to intercept by the time they could mobilize a response. Earth would already be under siege. There was only one option left. Ielthos authorized the use of the emergency faster-than-light communication arrays, burning through resources that would take years to replace, all to send a single message across the vast distance to that small blue world. The message was simple and desperate: HOSTILE, fleet approaching your system. Estimated arrival in 90 days, 60,000 warships. Intent is conquest and subjugation. We cannot reach you in time. You must flee. You cannot fight. Repeat, you cannot. F5. The Conclave waited for a response, hoping the humans would listen, praying that they would find a way to escape. Before the hegemony arrived, the response came back 12 hours later. It was one word, transmitted in every human language simultaneously, broadcast with a power that suggested every nation on Earth had spoken together for the first time in their entire history. Yelthos stared at the message for a long time, trying to understand what it meant. The humans were not running. They were not hiding. They were not even asking for help. They were welcoming the fight in the days that followed. The Conclave's long-range sensors detected something extraordinary happening on Earth. The humans were mobilizing not one nation, not one faction, but all of them. Every government and military and industrial complex on the planet working together in a frenzy of activity. That the Conclave could barely comprehend. Factories that had been building consumer goods were retooled to produce weapons. Shipyards that had been constructing cargo vessels were converted to military production. Research facilities that had been studying medicine and technology pivoted to creating new ways to kill. And through it all, the humans kept broadcasting not pleas for help, not requests for alliance, but music and speeches and what appeared to be entertainment programs showing fictional wars against alien invaders. They were motivating themselves. Yeltos realized with growing horror they were using their own media to prepare their population for what was coming. To stir up the emotions, they would need to fight a war against impossible odds. One broadcast in particular caught his attention. It showed a human standing before a massive crowd, speaking with a voice that carried across the entire planet. "They think we are divided," the human said, and the crowd roared in response. "They think that because we fight among ourselves, we will not fight together. They think that because we are many nations, we are weak." The crowd grew louder, a sound like thunder building across the world. They are about to learn how wrong they are. The roar that followed shook the sensors on the conclave's listening. Station Zillos leaned back in his chair and closed his eyes. He had warned the humans that they could not fight. He had told them to flee, and their response had been a single word. A word that suddenly made terrible sense. Good. They were not afraid of the coming war. They were not dreading the hegemony's arrival. They were looking forward to it for the first time in their history. Humanity had a common enemy, a threat from outside that unified all their scattered tribes and factions into a single purpose, and that purpose was War High Commander Vrethos had no idea what was waiting for him. He thought he was going to conquer a primitive divided species still squabbling over their own small world. He was about to discover what happens when you give 8 billion Deathworlders a reason to stop fighting each other and start fighting you. Unleashed, the hegemony fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of Sol System on a Tuesday morning. 60,000 warships arranged in perfect formation, their weapons charged, and their crews ready for what they expected to be an easy conquest. High Commander Vrethos stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, and surveyed the tactical display with satisfaction. Earth hung in the distance like a blue marble, small and fragile, surrounded by primitive satellites and what appeared to be a handful of crude vessels that could barely be called a defense force. He'd expected panic, had anticipated desperate last-minute negotiations, had prepared himself for the pathetic pleas of a species about to be enslaved. Instead, he received a transmission. It was a human woman, the same one who had met the conclave delegation, standing in what appeared to be a military command center surrounded by screens showing troop movements and fleet positions. "I, Commander Vrethos," she said, her voice calm and almost friendly. "My name is Shun Wei. I represent the unified military forces of Earth, and I've been asked to deliver a message from our species to yours." Vrethos gestured for his communications officer to respond. "Speak then, human. Deliver your terms of surrender." Chen Wei smiled, and something in that expression made Vrethos feel suddenly cold. "You misunderstand," she said. "We are not surrendering. We are giving you one chance to leave. One opportunity to turn your fleet around and return to wherever you came from. Take this chance, because you will not receive another." The bridge crew laughed, and Vrethos allowed himself a small smile. The arrogance of these primitives was almost amusing. "You are outnumbered 10,000 to 1, he said. "Your technology is generations behind ours. Your species has never fought a war beyond your own atmosphere. On what possible basis do you make such a threat?" Chen Wei's smile did not waver. "On the basis of what we are," she said simply. "You came here looking for soldiers, looking for weapons you could use against your enemies. You should have been more careful about what you wished for." The transmission ended. Vrethos ordered the fleet to advance. First wave of hegemony drones entered Earth's atmosphere, expecting minimal resistance, expecting to sweep aside whatever primitive defenses the humans had managed to construct in their 90 days of preparation. They were wrong. The sky erupted surfaced to orbit, railguns that humans had originally built to threaten each other now turned their fury outward, launching tungsten projectiles at velocities that turned simple metal into weapons of devastating power. Missiles rose from silos across every continent, nuclear-tipped warheads that humans had kept for decades as deterrents against each other, finally finding a purpose that unified rather than divided. The first wave of drones was annihilated, and Minitaz Vrethos watched the tactical display with growing disbelief. "Impossible," he whispered. "Their targeting system should not be capable of such precision. Their weapons should not be able to reach orbital altitudes." "High Commander," his sensor officer reported, voice trembling, "we are detecting multiple launches from the planetary surface. Hundreds of vessels rising on chemical propulsion. They appear to be heading directly for the fleet. on the main view screen. Vrethos watched as the sky over Earth filled with fire-human ships rose from every corner of the planet. Ugly angular vessels that looked more like armored boxes than spacecraft, covered in weapons and armor, plating and the desperate hope of a species that had decided it would rather die than submit. They were not elegant. They were not refined. They were not built for beauty or efficiency. They were built to survive, and they were built to kill. The battle that followed would be studied in military academies across the galaxy for centuries to come. Human vessels engaged hegemony warships at close range, too close for the sophisticated targeting systems of the invaders to function effectively, forcing brutal exchanges of fire where the side that could absorb more damage would win. The humans could absorb more damage. Their ships were designed with redundant systems and compartmentalized armor, designed by engineers who knew that their vessels would be outgunned and had planned accordingly. When one weapon failed, another took its place. When one section was breached, the crew sealed it off and kept fighting. When ships were crippled beyond any hope of repair, their crews aimed them at enemy vessels and accelerated to maximum speed. They did not surrender. They did not retreat. They did not stop. And then came the boarding actions. Hegemony vessels found themselves invaded by human soldiers in armored suits, warriors who fought through corridors with weapons designed for close combat, who engaged in hand-to-hand fighting with a ferocity that the hegemony had never encountered. One hegemony officer reported seeing a human continue to fight after losing an arm, using the blood from his wound to blind his opponent before strangling them with his remaining hand. Another reported a human soldier who had been shot through the chest 3 times, still advancing, still fighting, still refusing to fall until she had completed her mission. The hegemony soldiers were trained warriors, augmented with the finest technology their empire could provide, enhanced to be stronger and faster and more deadly than any natural soldier. It did not matter. The humans were not fighting as soldiers. They were fighting as something older, something more primal, something that had been forged in the fires of a death world across millions of years of evolution. They were fighting as survivors, and survivors do not know how to lose. High Commander Vrethos watched his tactical display turn from green to yellow to red as ship after ship reported critical damage, as entire squadrons went silent, as the impossible became real before his eyes. His invasion force of 60,000 vessels had been reduced to less than 40,000 in the first 6 hours of fighting. The humans had lost ships as well, thousands of them, but for every human vessel destroyed, 2 more seemed to rise from the planet below, crewed by volunteers who knew they were going to die and came anyway. "High Commander," his second officer said quietly, "we must consider withdrawal. Our losses are unsustainable. If we continue at this rate, we will have nothing left to return home." Vrethos wanted to argue, wanted to order another attack, wanted to prove that the hegemony could not be defeated by primitives from a poison world. But he was not a fool. He gave the order to retreat. The hegemony fleet fled Sol System, leaving behind 12,000 wrecked vessels and the broken bodies of millions of soldiers who had expected an easy victory and found something else entirely. As the survivors limped toward home, Vrethos received one final transmission from Earth. It was Chen Wei again, standing in the same command center, but now she was surrounded by celebrating humans, their faces marked with exhaustion and grief and savage triumph. "You came to our world looking for weapons," she said. "Looking for soldiers you could use against your enemies." She paused, and her smile was the smile of a predator who had just proven itself against a rival. "Remember this day, High Commander. Remember what we did to your fleet with 90 days of preparation and technology centuries behind yours. Remember that we did this while still fighting among ourselves." Her eyes hardened. "Then imagine what we will do if you give us a reason to truly unite." The transmission ended. High Commander Vrethos sat alone in his damaged bridge as his fleet crawled home in defeat. And he understood at last what the Conclave had tried to tell him. The humans were not just another species to be conquered. They were something new, something terrible, something that had been waiting in the dark corners of the galaxy for someone foolish enough to wake them up. The hegemony had opened the channel to Earth, and they had unleashed the Deathworlders upon the stars. In the years that followed, the Conclave would extend full membership to humanity, and Chen Wei would accept graciously on behalf of her species. New maps would be drawn with Sol System marked in red, carrying a warning that would persist for millennia. DHWRL Day. Do not engage in the halls of power across the galaxy. A new saying would spread among those who remembered what had happened when the hegemony tried to conquer Earth. There are 3 kinds of species in the universe: the living, the dead, and the humans. Pray you never learn which category you belong to.